This week's Parshat is Tetze. Tetze is a very long Parshat, and besides it being long, it's very involved, and it has, I think, 84 mitzvahs, which is out of 613, I think that's 12%. Basically 1 out of eight of all the mitzvahs in the Torah are in this week's Parshat. It's page 1185. And so because we have so many different types of mitzvahs, we'll try to get through a lot of them. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to ask them as we go. Parsha opens up with the verse, when you go out to war against your enemies. And we'll speak about that afterwards, more like. When you go out to war against your enemies, and God will deliver your enemies in your hands, and you'll take captives. So if you look at verse 11, there's an interesting mitzvah that if you see a beautiful woman, the soldiers see a beautiful woman, they're allowed to take them as a wife. But you can't just take them as a spoil of war. You have to bring them home and go through a whole process. They shave her head, let nails grow. And after 30 days of crying, 30 days of longing back to go back to her home, then you're allowed to marry her. Now, if you don't want to marry her at that point, you have to free her. You're not allowed to enslave her. You're not allowed to give her to someone else because you've so to speak, you've afflicted her for this time. You can't take advantage. Now, what's the idea of this mitzvah? So there's many esoteric meanings, but on the base level, it says that the Torah is talking to the evil inclination within the person, to the feeling in the person. I saw an interesting idea that if the Torah would because the Torah allows it, people have less of a desire to do it. Unfortunately, throughout history, soldiers in battle are very much. This is common practice that there's they take captives and they mistreat them. So the Torah is giving you a process how to do it. The Torah is speaking to the evil inclination within the person to tell them, okay, you have a recourse. You have the way the description is pasal. You have bread in your basket. You're not so hungry when you have a legal way to do something. You're not going to do it in a non-legal way. Though at the end of the day, the Torah discourages doing. It's not the proper way to do, but there is though allowing it in this case. The next.
So does she made a Jewish?
This is not a Jewish. It's not.
That's not Jewish.
She goes through a conversion and that process there. She's not a Jewish. This is from the enemy and that you're fighting against. The idea is to make her. Him not be attracted to her for beauty. Do you still want her after that, and then convert her and marry her? If you don't want her, the Torah is still encouraging that they should marry within the community. If you still want her at that point, then you marry her. If not, let her go free. Let her become a free person in society. Don't hold on to her.
But she's kind of looking at captivity for 30 days.
She is. Then the Parsha continues on page 1187. The man is married to two wives. One is beloved and one is despised. And the one who's beloved, the one who's despised son is older. He gets a double portion of inheritance. The Torah law is that inheritance, the way you divide up inheritance is, let's say there's three sons. So you divide up the inheritance into four. Those you get half list, and the other two each get a quarter. And so on, so forth. But the Torah says you can't prefer one son over the other. It goes according to both order. If the older son, even if it's from the despised wife, is born first, he gets double. He gets a double portion. Then it comes to an even more interesting mitzvah, the mitzvah of the rebellious son, wayward son, as they put it here. We have in verse 18, if a man has a son who rebels against his parents, and this is only talking about someone who's 13, from the age of 13 to 13 and a half, and he's a guzzler, he drinks wine and he fresses meat, and his parents tell him off, he doesn't listen, and he steals money from them, and he buys more wine and meat and acts in this way. The parents warn him, and they take him to the elders of the city, and they try him, and he's put to death. It's a very interesting law. Why is he put to death? What did he do so bad? They say that what's going to happen is that if this is how he is when he's young, he's going to end up stealing and robbing and murdering later on in life. The Talmud discusses that this never happened. There was never such a wayward son that was put to death for his actions. So what's the purpose of talking about it? It's an idea that the Torah is just giving us more things to study and receive reward for our study. But in actuality, in what happened in this world, it never actually was this case of the wayward son. What we could learn from here is many ways of discipline or whatever it is. And I heard a really nice idea this morning that the Hebrew words for a wayward son are ben sorer umoreh. As he translated here, wayward and rebellious. The word moreh also means in Hebrew
Learning.
teaching or learning. Moreh is a teacher, male teacher. So the idea is that maybe a wayward son or maybe a wayward student, but really it's a teacher. He teaches the parent something new. He teaches the parent how to properly relate to kids. You end up learning from the hardest kids, from the kids who are the most rebellious and the most difficult. You end up the parent or the teacher ends up learning. The nice thing that I heard today. Now, what's the law if someone was sentenced to death for one of the mitzvahs in the Torah? That if someone committed one of the sins that the sentence is stoning, after the stoning they would hang them. The time to there's no capital punishment of hanging. You don't kill by hanging, but someone who was killed by stoning would be hung. So it says that you're not allowed to leave them overnight. Look at verse 23. You don't let it leave it hanging overnight. It has to be buried in that day. And that's actually where the idea comes that we try to bury as soon as possible. In Jewish religion, faith, we don't customs are not to allow the body to wait for so long. We want to as fast as possible bury them. Do you remember in the practical in the case of Constanza, we had that story with those people that were worried about burying and they used to leave them in those houses. So Jewish ways, we bury as soon as possible, as soon as it's able. And it says the reason is that why can't you allow it to hang overnight? Because it's an affront to God. Because we are created in the image of God. If imagine they say if the king has a brother who's hung as a thief, the mayor has a brother who's hung as a thief, the king doesn't want that overnight. It looks exactly the same as him. He wants him to be buried. Same thing. We are made in the image of God. It's disrespectful to God that a human should be hanging overnight. Are you gonna ask one?
Yeah, why do they have to put him on a pole? What's the reason for that?
Well, to show say the simple reason would be to show that someone who transgresses this sin, well, this is the punishment.
Oh, so it's like yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna get to some more prosaic laws. The laws of returning lost items is a mitzvah called Hashavat Amidah, returning lost objects. If you see something you don't know who lost it, you have to hold it by you till the owner comes and reclaims it. These signs that says, "Oh, I know in that tablecloth I lost that was a stain in the corner." That's a good sign, and you take his object is lost. Now they tell the story in the Talmud of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who was one of the great teachers of the Talmud, and one time someone left chickens in his property, and he was very poor himself, but he took these chickens and he fed them and he kept them going till the owners came back. And to the point, how many chickens are gonna if you feed them they'll multiply. So he sold the chickens and he bought them goats. Eventually, by the time the guy came back, he had a whole and he came looking for his chickens. He was returned a whole herd of goats. That was what he was returned. He made a lot more, much greater than his original loss. That's the great extremes of the mitzvah. The law would be in the case of someone being like you find lost animals, you would sell it and you leave the money aside till someone would come. Other lost objects, you just take it to your house and you have to put it in a safe place and wait till someone comes with this symbols and sort of the signs that it's theirs. And they say that some things you say leave it till Elijah the prophet comes, till we have the prophecy, till Mashiach comes and the guy will come back to reclaim it. You gotta have it stuck.
I'm expected to do something more proactive to find it. Just put it like in my.
We'd have to announce it. We'd have to. The way it worked was you would announce it, and especially the times of the holidays in Jerusalem, there was a place called Even HaToyin, which was the announcing stone. Everyone would come and say, you make an announcement, and you would actually have to wait enough time that people should be able to go home, check that they lost something, and come back to pick it up. So there was public places to announce that you lost something. But I was saying that if you can't find who it is, you leave it. Interestingly, cash doesn't have unless it's in a specific wallet or in a certain way that it's placed. So if you found the middle somewhere $2 coins piled in a tower, that would be something else. But cash per se doesn't have there's no symbol. Even if someone had their name on the dollar, if someone had written a stamp or a name on the dollar on the $10 bill, doesn't mean anything because cash is spent by hand. So therefore, it wouldn't be you're allowed to keep any time money allowed to keep it. Another place also a shul, a synagogue, you're allowed to if you find something you're allowed to keep it. From the straight out law, because people check their pockets and it's a public place. People will check their pockets and they've already give up on it. Once they've lost it, they will give up on it. They say about the shul in 770 in New York, the big main headquarters. Someone asked the rabbi one time, "What's considered yield? What's considered that the person has given up on an object and you're allowed to keep it?" He says, as soon as the person turns around, it's already, if you can't see, you already lost it. It's such a big public thoroughfare. Things come and go. People have given up on that straight away. There's a whole tractate in the whole chapter in the tractate of Baba Messiah, all about the laws of finders, keepers, and Hazor. Then we have the law of you have to give assistance if you see your brother's donkey or ox falling under the road. It's verse 4 on page 1189. You have to help him. You can't ignore him. You have to help him. Then there's the laws against cross-dressing because that leads to male shalom, female clothing, female shalom, male clothing because that will lead to what was it say? It leads to the ways of adultery and to abomination to God. Then there's the interesting law of if you find a bird's nest in the ground, if you want to take the chicks or the eggs, you have to send away the mother bird. There's many laws exactly where it applies. And it says that the reward is that in order that it go well for you and you live long. Now, the Talmud says that if for such an easy mitzvah, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you. You're not doing it. It doesn't cost you to send away the mother bird before you take the eggs, and you still receive such a great reward. Certainly, mitzvahs which are much more difficult and costly and more effort and more time, for sure we get great reward from God. What's the reason of the mitzvah? So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to say that the reason for the mitzvah is that God wants you to showing kindness even on the little birds. Because if that were the reason, then why would you be in general allowed to take the eggs, and why would you be allowed to slaughter at all? So that's obviously not the reason. The different commentators have different explanations. What's exactly the purpose? But at the end of the day, it is something to do with kindness. It is something to do with mercy, and it is something to do with not training yourself to be cruel. And if you're taking the egg while the mother bird's there, the mother bird won't be able to run away herself. She'll be fighting back. She's seeing her babies being taken, her chicks being taken. So the mitzvah is send the mother bird away, and then you can take the eggs, then you can take the chicks. This only law applies to if you own the birds, then this whole thing doesn't apply. If you own the nest, then the birds will come back. Talking about you find one in the path, and find one in a public place. That's another interesting mitzvah. So then we have the mitzvahs of you look at verse 8 on page 1191. The mitzvah of when you build a new home, you have to build a fence around the roof. Nowadays, when you have flat roofs, nowadays we don't really have flat roofs, but once upon a time, everyone had a lot of flat roofs. Or here, let's say the shul, the flat roof. You would have to build a fence around it so that you don't want your roof to fall off. And that's also the source of the law to be careful of any people. You shouldn't have a shaky ladder in your house. You shouldn't have a dangerous dog that's not controlled. You shouldn't leave knives around. All these things are put down in the law based on this mitzvah, not to be careful with human life and careful with the life and limb. Actually, when I said the shul, a shul doesn't need the shul or the temple. Beit HaMikdash don't need a specifically a private home. I'm going through quickly because there's just a chocolate of misses in this Parshat. But then we talk about mixing species. There's 4 mitzvahs about mixing species. Mitzvah number 1 is not to plant two crops together. don't mix two seeds. Don't plant, let's say, wheat and grapes together, and don't also graft. You don't do it against the. I know people nowadays you're allowed to eat fruit that came from grafted trees, two different types of trees together, but you don't know how to do it. That's one mitzvah is don't mix two types of seeds. The second mitzvah is don't plow your field with an ox and a donkey in the same harness. As well, obviously, do not crossbreed animals. Again, you're allowed to use a crossbred animal, a mule. If anything, the Jewish kings rode mules, but a Jew is not allowed to do the crossbreeding. And the fourth of the mixture mitzvahs is a mitzvah called Chabad, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, which is not to mix wool and linen.
Not to mix what?
Wool and linen. So if you ever heard of Shana's checking, we'll check like a suit or something clothing which was a lot more likely. Well, that's the clothing enough to check. There's no wool and linen floating around there at all. And even the ones that are saying wool, maybe they don't have wool with them. But so these are four mitzvahs about mixtures, and it's very interesting that the Torah doesn't want different things being mixed together. Things which are meant to be, these let's say the wool and linen is very interesting. Wool is from the animal kingdom. It's from the sheep or from the goat, whatever. And actually I think it's only sheep in the problem. Yeah. And linen is from flax, it's from a plant. The first fight in the world, one of the first fights in the world was between Cain and Abel, Cain and Abel, two sons of Adam, the first man. And what was their fight? Cain got all the land, and Abel got all the animals. And Cain turns to Abel and says to him, "Get off my land! You're standing on my land. I own the world. There's only two. Well, the two of the only people in the world. It was only their parents and them." And Abel tells him back, "What are you wearing? You're wearing clothing which is belongs to me, sheep clothing." And that started the fight between the two of them, and to the point that Cain ended up murdering Abel. That's the first Parshat of there. And it's one of the esoteric meanings behind the mitzvahs. You don't want to mix those two things together. You want to mix the linen and the wool. At the end of the day, these mitzvahs, many of these mitzvahs are mitzvahs we don't have an explanation for. The mitzvahs because God wanted us to do it, but we could try it as much as possible. Try to give explanation and understand the mitzvahs.
Dogs, they cross breed, they.
Dogs and one type of dog and another type of dog. It's all the same.
Exactly.
So they're all the same dog.
So you can.
If you start crossing a dog and a cat, I don't know if it's impossible, but if you start crossing, that would be a problem.
So I know there's also apart from shadows, but there's also certain different colours as well of clothing. Isn't there a restriction on that? Is that what a mitzvah or is it just a custom?
Meaning like what, wearing red, you say?
Yeah, like you can't wear like bright like
the idea of wearing red. Where it comes from, the idea of not wearing red, and many Jewish people know about this, is there was an idea not to wear very loud or
loud colors,
which are copying at the time what the general public did. It's probably still in effect. I'm personally, I've never been tempted to wear a bright red jacket, but yeah, it's not the same. This is a bit of it's a biblical incident. Or a stringency based on not wearing the latest cool fashion, whatever it was. There's a discussion at what stage does it become mixed. If I just take a wool thread and linen thread and weave them together, is that mixed? Or that the threads themselves have to be spun and on wool and linen, meaning threads themselves made up of wool and linen strands. But then we also want a reminder to the laws of Tetze that we had all the way back. And the reason why the laws of Tetze are brought right here is to tell you that, biblically speaking, you're allowed the one exception to wearing wool and linen, actually one of two exceptions of wearing wool and linen, is Tetze. If you have a linen garment, you're allowed to put wool and Tetze on it. We don't do it because, hey, you might forget to take it off at night, you might sleep in it, and then you'll be transgressing because there's no actual mitzvah of wearing Tetze at night, it's a custom. You'll be transgressing the mitzvah of wearing wool and linen. So we don't. That's what we don't do it. We put wool on a wool strings. But in theory, mitzvah of Shabbos is superseded by the mitzvah of tzitzis. No worries.
So usually, the singlet.
Yeah.
The linen. So
Yeah.
there's white books, they're wool. So you're
Yeah.
not allowed to have this.
So if they're not connected, it's definitely a biblical issue and even a rabbinic issue. It's people who are very stringent on themselves. They'll be careful not to do that. But that's not the letter of the law. That's not the letter of the law. Letter of the law is something which is a garment made of the two materials. Meaning the people who are very careful, they didn't want in case one strand somehow gets mixed into the other one. There were people who were very careful with that, but I wouldn't say that's the baseline of the mitzvah. Now the next laws are the laws of if someone accuses that their wife wasn't a virgin when they're married, and it's the whole back and forth about it. I think with lack of time, I'm not going to go into that mitzvah itself. You can read it yourself. Then there's a discussion the mitzvah of against adultery, that if adultery took place if within the city, then they're both considered liable. It's both the man and the woman who are at fault because she should have screamed out. If the city meaning more the place where it's possible to be there, she should have screamed out and people will come to save her. If it's outside the city or in a place where we know someone was raped in a place where no one will be able to hear, then only the man is liable. And then there's the laws of forbidden marriages. Look in chapter 23 and verse 1, 1195. You shouldn't marry your father's wife, even after the father died or divorced. A Jew who can't without reproductive organs shouldn't marry a Jew because they shouldn't marry into the Jewish community because you can't have kids. You can't marry a convert. And then there's the laws about a mamzer. What a mamzer means, someone who's born from a forbidden union, meaning someone who's born outside marriage. Like in English, the word bastard means someone who's born outside marriage, outside the thing. Mamzer is specifically someone who's born from a union which is forbidden. Specific unions which are forbidden. They're not married to the general community. Then the nations of Ammon and Moab are not allowed to marry the community. It was only the Ammonite men not allowed to marry the community. Ammonite women and the Moabite women were allowed to. This spoke on Shavuos that Ruth, the great grandmother of King David, was a Moabite convert. So Moabite women were allowed to marry the community. It's specifically Moabite men are not. And what's the reason? Because if you remember, they're the ones who hired the Bilam to come curse the Jewish people. So for that reason, we don't that cruelty. We don't have to marry it. But you're not allowed to oppress those. You're not allowed to oppress the Moabites. You're not allowed to go and give them problems. Just don't marry into the community. Same thing with the Edomite. They can marry in after third generations. Similarly, the Egyptians, after 3 generations, when they converted, they're allowed to marry into the community. Now, the truth be told, that today, since Sancherib came, which was the king of Assyria, and he mixed up all the nations of the world, people live in Egypt, not those Egyptians. The people live in Ammon, wherever that would be, in modern day Syria, whatever it was, and not those people. It's all mixed up, and therefore, any convert is allowed to marry into the community as long as it's not marrying a Kohen or something like that, which is not a convert. But they don't have the same. These are biblical laws, but those people, the Egyptian who lives in Egypt today is not the Egyptian for once upon that. Let's find some more interesting. Look at verse 11 on page 1194. We're talking about the laws of the Jewish camp. The Jewish camp, when the Jews go out to war, their camp has to be pure. Someone who has a nocturnal seminal mission has to go outside the camp and has to purify himself. If you look at verse 13, we have the laws of keeping hygiene in the war camp, the army camp. You have to make sure every soldier, besides for his weapons, also carried a shovel to cover up whatever he needed to cover up his excrement. And the reason for this is in verse 15, because God accompanies you to a military camp to rescue you, to deliver your enemies before you. Therefore, the camp must be kept holy, so he does not see anything unseemly to you and turn away. So basically, we're very important. It's very important that Jewish camp, a Jewish army, should be kept to a very pure, holy, clean level, and that keeps the godliness within our army. Interesting law now, verse 16 is you can't hand over. Imagine a slave, a Jewish, non-Jewish slave from a different country escapes to Israel. You don't have to give them back to their owners. The slave has escaped. They made it to, like an underground railroad. They made it to Canada. They're free. So if you made it to Israel, you will never give them back. And he lives wherever he wants, and he's allowed to live amongst the Jewish people. And then there's the law against prostitution. Then there's a law against giving loans on interest. Look at verse 23 on page 1196. Very interesting mitzvah that if you make a promise to give a sacrifice, then you should not delay in fulfilling it. Meaning you shouldn't allow 3 festivals to pass before you bring the sacrifice that you promised. Verse 24 tells us that you have to keep your word. In general, if you make a promise and make an oath, keep it. Don't go back on your vows. Then we talk about the laws of workers' rights. The workers have special benefits that if a worker is in the field, you can't tell a worker he can't eat from the field that he's collecting. Let's say he's taking all your grapes. He's allowed to eat as much as he's able to eat during the time. He's not allowed to take any with him. He's not allowed to feed it to someone else. But while he's working, you can't, so to speak, muzzle your workers. Let's say the question is if it would also apply to if you're a bakery, you have to allow your workers to eat while they're baking, while they're working. Then is the laws of divorce. That it's obviously not the first case scenario, but if the marriage goes south, is a mitzvah that allows divorce. Now, if she and the divorce has to happen through a written contract that's written and signed, special laws in it about it. If she leaves the house and marries someone else, and then there's a divorce or a widow, if she's widowed, that thing, she cannot return to the previous husband. If she hasn't married someone else, she's always allowed to go back to the previous husband. If anything, it's a mitzvah to marry. There's a special mitzvah to remarry a divorced. If it's possible, if it's makes sense. So again, it's not a number one. It's not a obviously when the marriage is meant to happen, the marriage is meant to be forever. But if a marriage has to come to an end, it's a special procedure. Even if not necessarily you're interested in remarrying, whatever it is, someone's not necessarily interested in remarrying, it's important to have that to have that closure, that Allah can finish to the relationship. Then we talk about the army exemptions. We spoke about them a little last week, but here it codifies that for the first year of marriage, you go out to the army. There's a law naki yelabeto to be, you remain clean from everything else. You remain just for your house for the first year, and that's where we learn out this idea of shana rishena, the idea of the first year of marriage. They don't travel without each other. They don't. The first year you're building the relationship. You focus, you stay together. The year you don't go out to war. That's interesting. This Parshat has 84 mitzvahs, but non-stop. I'd say the laws against kidnapping, which we mentioned already in the Ten Commandments, but kidnapping is a capital offense. If someone kidnaps and enslaves or sells into cells, then you once you've caught the person who did it, you put to death. Let's look at verse 14. The laws of employees' wages. You're not meant to pay your employees' wages. I don't know if some employers don't know this, but it's actual mitzvah. They have to pay on the day. Question: if we're God's employees, why hasn't he given us shirchet? Why hasn't he given us our reward yet? It's a good question. Oh, very good. So depends what type of employment it is. If it's a hour wage, daily wage, then you have to pay on the day. If it's you give someone a contract, you give them a job and you pay at the end. So then, but I think at this point we've done enough, and God has at least give us work to enable us to keep working. He needs to give us something. He needs to give us some payment. Verse 16 tells us that disqualify fathers for testifying against the sons or sons testifying against the father. Children, relatives cannot be witnesses for the relative's case. Why? Because they're biased. They're biased one way or the other. Either biased positively, the biased negatively. But a relative is not allowed. And interestingly, you would think that, oh, what if it's most very trustworthy? It says Moshe and Aaron wouldn't be allowed to testify for each other. Moshe and Aaron are not going to lie. They're right?
I'm not going to walk consciously. No,
The question becomes, if two men are married to women, can they testify for each other? No. What about cousins? There's a certain this case that's weird. Let's say for a wedding, we're careful that the two witnesses and the witnesses to the wedding party themselves shouldn't be related. Even third, we do second and third cousins where we have extra. In verse 17 and onward, we speak about that to be very, very careful when you're dealing with a widow or with orphans. They're very disadvantaged emotionally and physically. You have to be very careful when you're taking a collateral, when you're deciding a law. You have to be very careful with them not to do anything at their expense. Even if the widow is wealthy, it's still she has a psychological disadvantage, and she's lost something. You have to be careful with that. The laws of lashes. Interesting. Mitzvah. It's verse 3 on page 1205. You never give more than 39 lashes. For whatever purpose, your no punishment will be more than 39 lashes. And even then, there'll be less if the person was assessed and they'll be able to handle it. Again, the certain transgressions, which would be which lashes will be administered for. Yeah.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
I think maybe it can be 40 because we spent 40 days and then we start to punishment.
I hear you. Idea is it says 40. It says 40 in the verse. We never give 40. You know why? Because if you by mistake count from one too many, you don't. The guy's thing. You're never gonna go over the 40 limit. If someone's being lashed and they defecate from the losing control of their bowels, then they don't get the rest of their punishment, because that's already that the shame itself is already more than enough punishment for them, and that's it. Now, interestingly, just like you're not meant to muzzle your workers, it's like the workers meet the officer not to best muzzle animal. Animal has to be eating allowed to eat while threshing. Now, what you could do is you could put a feed bag that's eating something else, and won't be eating the stuff on the threshing. Now there's interesting more the levirate marriage. What's the levirate marriage? There's two brothers, one passes away without kids. So the living brother should marry the wife of the brother passed away to continue his brother's legacy and have children. And they do a process called chalitza. Chalitza is a very interesting process. If you read it there, she would come to the elders of the city and say, "My brother-in-law doesn't want to marry me, and this is what we're going to do." He would wear a shoe. She would untie his. It's a special shoe, the chalitza shoe. If you Google, you'll see what it looks like. He would untie his shoe, and she would spit at the shoe and say, "This, my brother-in-law doesn't want to keep his brother's name alive." And if everyone say, "He is brother-in-law doesn't want to keep his brother's name alive," and she would be free to marry whoever she wants. About 1,000 years ago, or maybe a little more, the common practice was not to practice Hebrew anymore, not to marry. Sister does not marry your brother-in-law, and the only in first scenario you do the chalitza ceremony. You do this for the most part in Ashkenaz communities. They didn't do Hebrew anymore. They didn't do levirate marriage. They only do the special chalitza ceremony. Let's go. There's two lessons we'll point out. Verse 13 about honesty in business. You shouldn't have two weights in your pocket. What does it mean, two weights? You shouldn't have, We just use the scale. Yeah, I think it's stuff that you still see sometimes in the market stores. They have a scale. You put the fruit on one side. When it says 1 kilo on the brick or whatever on the thing, it should be 1 kilo. It should be there should be no monkey business. More than a kilo, less than a kilo. You know, there's no playing with that. And to the point that the base of actually the core of Jewish law would go around checking a few times a year, go around checking the weights to make sure all the weights are real to the point. And the last mitzvah of the Parshat is remembering Amalek. Who's Amalek? Amalek was the nation that attacked us after we left Egypt, and they attacked us from the rear. And we have a mitzvah that we should never forget them and wipe them out. It says, Timcha Zecha Amalek, wipe out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heavens. Do not forget them. There is evil in the world. We can't equivocate on it. You have to be clear what's evil or what's the right thing you do, and it has to be stamped out. Anyone have any questions before we go to a little bit more in depth? A lot of mitzvahs. It's chock full of this Parshat.
I've got a question more in relation to the fact that a lot of these, some can be kept and others in this day.
And we don't have those mitzvahs.
Yeah.
Question. For the most part, there aren't that many mitzvahs that we can put down in this. And Nachman in these lists, and in general, the 630 mitzvahs. Of them, 365 are prohibitions. 248 are positive mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs, we can do something like 87 in the hearts. That's it. A lot of them apply only with the temple, sacrifices, land of Israel, king, etc., etc. Even of those 87, many of them, our lives don't align necessarily. We're on a farmer, you're not living that lifestyle. So what's the story of these mitzvahs? So the Rabbi one time explained, I think it was this week, 1989, so it's that 37 years ago, that God saw that we weren't able to do many of these mitzvahs. It's becoming, so to speak, a burden on us. It's difficult for us to do. The only reason why God gave us so many mitzvahs was in order to purify us, in order to make us cleansed, in order to clean us up, in order to help us to refine us. That's the big word. In order to refine us. So when he saw that mitzvahs are not helping, if anything, we're just getting bogged down, he, so to speak, removed these mitzvahs for now. Now, these mitzvahs still exist, and they will, please God, exist when Mashiach comes, and we'll be in a much higher spiritual state, and we'll be able to fulfill the mitzvahs in the proper manner. Right now, these mitzvahs are not applicable, and we don't have them in our day-to-day. There's an idea that a defendant can't become a prosecutor. A prosecutor shouldn't become a defendant. The whole purpose of mitzvah is to be a defendant for us. It's to help us, to show for us, to save us, to say positive things on our behalf. Be a defendant. If it gets to a point that mitzvahs are becoming a prosecutor because we're not doing them because we can't do them because it's more difficult, God doesn't want such mitzvahs. So in a way, God has removed many of these mitzvahs which we were once upon a time we had them, they applied to us and day. He's removed them from the equation right now. We don't have them. We only have much more limited amount of mitzvahs that we do and we could do. Please God, one day when Mashiach comes, we'll have them back. We're not going to have necessarily a desire to do the wrong thing then, so that's a different story. But for now, the whole purpose, it's not that this guy has mitzvahs and then he has Jewish people who do the mitzvahs. God has Jewish people, and he has mitzvahs to help the Jewish people. He has mitzvahs to help them connect to God. The word mitzvah itself could mean commandment, but if you translate it more correctly, it means connection. That's the difference between a commandment and a connection. There's someone here and tells you what to do, and that's it. A connection means God is giving us abilities. This is one way to connect me. It's another way to connect me. It's a third way to connect me. Now they both really at the end of the day mean the same thing. They're both a relationship between the commander and the one who's playing the command. but you're stressing something else. You're stressing the connection aspect of it. You're stressing the commandment aspect. Well, so it's a little bit of a deep theological point that who's the center of attention here? The mitzvah is the center of attention, or the Jew is the center of attention? If the Jew is the center of attention, so only in a scenario where the mitzvahs are going to help you, are going to help the Jew, are going to help the Jewish people, then God wants those mitzvahs. If the mitzvahs are only becoming a hindrance, only becoming a stumbling block, only dragging the Jewish people down, God doesn't want such mitzvahs. He doesn't have a need for such mitzvahs. God commanded this mitzvahs, the verse, the term is the zakot of Israel, to refine the Jewish people, to give the Jewish people merit. So right now we only have a limited amount of mitzvahs, much less than we had biblical times, or even later than that, and much less than we will have in the Messianic era. But right now, these are the mitzvahs which we have, which all right, it's plenty. It's plenty as it is. It's not like we're lacking what to do. It's not lacking what to do. But these are the mitzvahs which are, so to speak, designed with the Messianic era. Does that make sense of it?
Still with the focus on positive mitzvahs as opposed to the negative ones.
Positive means do this. Negative as in prohibition. Do not even get meat, whatever. It's positive and negative.
But there's a balance between the two, isn't there? It's
There
like,
are some mitzvahs which are positive and negative. Meaning, rather do this and don't do that. Put it on the film. That's actually two. Let's put it on the film and on the headphone. There's no negative there. There's no don't like pay your wages. I think it's a positive measure, pay the wages on time, and a negative measure, don't pay the wages late.
So with putting on tefillin, is there one about the time of day?
No, the tefillin are from sunrise to sundown.
And if it's before sunrise?
You don't.
It's not a prohibition. It's just
It's the mitzvah. The mitzvah has a time and a place, right? It's a time bound mitzvah. If before sunrise is a little bit of this maybe half an hour before that, that's still it's second best. The second best.
I'd like to put it on Shabbat.
Yeah, even that is not a prohibition. It's complicated. What about putting it on Shabbat? No, but you're right. To the point that in the Talmudic times, there was even a blessing they made when they took off the film. One time people wore film all day. We only wear it to pray or whatever. Some 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or half an hour, whatever our prayer is. That's what we wear film. But once upon a time, people wore film all day. And the only time they would make a blessing for taking it off was right before Shabbat. We don't make a blessing taking off film. We make a blessing putting on film. It's an interesting subject for itself. Yeah, I mean, the school you said we don't. Yeah, we can play it. Okay, let's talk about the Parshat. So if you look at the first verse, it says, "If you go out to war, to wage a war against your enemies." Now, in the Hebrew, the word is "Tetze al oveka." How do you translate the word "al"? Aliyah, you speak Hebrew. What does "al" mean? Above, on, above your enemies. So, although it will be commonly translated as "you wage war on your enemies, against your enemies," this "on" means above your enemies. There's different ways to wage a war. There's a way to wage a war, or any struggle, any fight, any disagreement, so to speak. One way is you have two people on even ground, and they're slugging it out, either hand-to-hand combat or with weaponry, but it's on the same level. Now, even if the victor at the end of the day will also be damaged, will also have got injuries, will also suffer some losses. The other way, alovecha, which means to wage war above the enemy, is that in the first place you stand on a higher plane. You're at a higher perspective and a higher peak. Especially nowadays with the high-tech battles, we have, we're more sophisticated, we have the drones, we have whatever it is. There's a very big difference if you're fighting on par with the enemy or you're fighting above the enemy. The term, when Torah speaks about war, it's talking about it on two planes. It's talking about it, obviously, literal war. You're fighting a war against enemies. We had that in the past in Jewish history, and we have that, I think, in the present. We take to arms. It's not we don't stay in a philosophical space. We take, in real day-to-day life, we have to fight a war, and the way you fight a war is not to get bogged down, dragged down, to be on the level of the enemy. You have to be in a higher state, in a higher plane, in a higher way of fighting. Then there's also the wars of spirit. When Torah talks about the war, it's not just talking about the physical war, it's talking about the spiritual war. We're not talking about, external enemies from the outside are fighting against us. There's an internal battle within every person, within every Jew. It's part and parcel within ourselves. There's a struggle, there's a battle. You have the material desires and the spiritual desires. And as we all know from our day-to-day lives, they don't always line up. We have different pulls in different directions, and it's quite complicated. You have that tension. You have who's going to be in control of the situation here? Is it what the spiritual wants, what the material wants? Is it what our physical bodies want? Is it what our spiritual soul wants? And it's quite intense. Maybe just as intense, or if not more intense than all out. One country facing the other country, facing up against the other country. You have the pulls in different directions. Now, if we were fighting with the same weapons, we were fighting against that enemy head on, meaning we were both fighting with intellectual capabilities, emotional capabilities, just thoughts and feelings. So one day the spiritual is going to win, one day the physical is going to win. One day the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination will win, one day the negative inclination will win. Why? Because you're fighting over the same battleground. You both could channel, the good and the bad, you both channel your thought process, your brains, and you can also channel your emotions. One day it says that one day Yaakov will be greater, one day Esau will be greater. One day, each one will have different days of victory, times of victory. But if we remember that the spiritual soul is a literal part of the divine, it's part of God that's been put into the person, it's been inserted down here below. So that's like bringing out the nuclear bomb. That's like bringing out the much stronger weapon, on a much higher plane. And that allows for the spiritual to actually win. Be head and shoulders above the physical. So again, if we're just talking about it, if we look at it on a very basic level, the physical and spiritual are just going to be constantly seesawing up and down. Who's victorious? They're fighting against each other. If we look at it on a higher plane, the spiritual can be very much above the enemy, above the physical, above the negative, which are trying to pull him down, because he's really tapped into and he's connected to a much, much higher source to guide himself. Now, when you're fighting in a battle or it's a wrestling match on the same level, what happens is you stimulate very much an aggressive nature. It's very there's a heat of the battle, the heat of emotions and the feeling. Like you're getting so involved and you're arguing, you're screaming, you're fighting, and you have an urge to destroy, or at least to beat the other person, or to beat the other nation, or to beat the other feeling. You get bogged down in that. You see, unfortunately, if you have to be aggressive because you're finding very difficult to fight, there's negative tendencies that come out as well. Aggressiveness could, even though it's warranted and you need it at this case, you need it here to fight that. You need to have that strong, intense emotion. It could also cause you to be callous and lose the human humanity. This is in real life, in nation to nation, and within the person. It applies in both scenarios. But when your whole perspective is being above the enemy, for the first place, the way when you're looking at the enemies, you're above. So then you don't have that aggressiveness. You have much more pity and compassion for the enemy. Obviously, you have to go through the victory. You have to win, as we saw last week. You can't do these half jobs, and you can't not go to a full victory. You have to go to a full victory. But your perspective is not vengeance. Your perspective is victory. That's win, but you still have compassion and pity on the loser. It's quite a fine difference between. We're not saying I feel so bad and I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win the war. No, you have to win the war. You have to be victorious. But at the same time, you don't come out with a very aggressive, vengeance-seeking streak. You come out with compassion and pity for the one who lost and who's lower than you. And then once you accomplish the victory, once you won, the role is now to elevate and teach the loser, to elevate and teach the enemy of vanquish. As the first mitzvah we spoke about today was the mitzvah that you take the captives of war, take the beautiful lady, and you take her back to Israel, take her back to your land, and you go through a stage of conversion and positive guidance, bringing the captive to a state of being able to join the Jewish people, become one of us. It goes through a transition and this conversion. So you're not vanquishing her, you bring out the good aspects that are left once you've won. And the ultimate purpose here is marriage. Right? You said you're meant to marry her. The captive is meant to be married. What's marriage? It's the fusion of the spiritual and the physical. At the end of the day, when the spiritual fights against the physical, it's not meant to vanquish the physical and then, no, we don't want to have anything to do with our physical body, anything to do with our physical living in the world. That's not the purpose. Again, as I spoke many times, other religions who believe in being a monk of the mountain. Take the spiritual, has to win. The spiritual has to be the one calling the shots. The physical can't be running amok and running its own life. But the spiritual, once it's vanquished, once it's won over the physical, has to now have a marriage, have a fusion with the physical, has to live the physical life in this world where the spiritual is calling the shots. So that all comes from this perspective of being above the enemy. When you're fighting against the enemy, you get you don't always win. You have some things he wins, some things they win. Yeah. B, even when you're winning, you have a vengeance and a cruelty. When you're fighting above the enemy, you will always win because you're tapping into your higher state, a higher source where you come from. And secondly, once you win, you have compassion and you'll be able to re-educate and bring to the ultimate purpose of actually having a fusion, having a connection, having a marriage between the physical and the spiritual. Make sense? You have a question? Sure.
So gave us commandments to make us pure, holy, his nation, and he wants us to be, those merciful and good people. Yeah, his people. And everything that happened when Jewish people came out of Egypt and went in the desert, were 40 years in the desert. It's like a miracle, so many miracles. And when they came to Israel, why did they have to kill all those people who lived in the promised land in order to settle them? Why God did not do another last miracle, like one more miracle in the process of Yetziat Mitzrayim, so Jewish people could settle in the promised land peacefully, not murder anyone, not to take captives, and not to convert those women. And
so we spoke last week. That the first thing is you have to pursue for peace, and if they want for peace, then they have a few options to leave.
Why didn't he kind of like clean? Because this issue remains until the very day, like the battle to whom belongs the land. Why, like he's done so many things for Jewish people, like across the sea and man and everything. So many like huge.
Same time for us to graduate to no miracle school.
Yeah, but
That's once we enter the land of Israel, we lost it. We're back into the way the world runs, and we have to work at that. We don't have the.
But he wants us to be merciful. Yeah, he wants us to be clean.
If you can.
And he wants us to be like spiritual and pure and kind and peaceful and everything. Why did Jewish people had to fight? Those.
You're asking why God puts it in the world. Why do we have challenges? Why didn't God just make the world a place that we don't have any challenges?
He promised land, like that holy land, which I fully believe, like okay, it's promised land. Thank you, But why didn't he kind of like the people go? You're not just.
Then we wouldn't work for it.
Huh?
Then we wouldn't have worked for it. It would be
we could work the land, we still have to work very hard to live in Israel.
At the end of the day, evil has to be eradicated. You can't allow evil to fester. If you do, then
It's so big, there are so many like
to leave. The people were told the sue for peace. If they want to leave it, there was one of the 7 nations who lived in the land did escape and moved to Africa. It says the Girgashi moved to Africa. They didn't stay in the whole land. Let's look back
what
at
is your answer? I'm sorry, what is your answer? Why
look back
did
at
they have to fight?
there were people that were evil. There were people who had to be destroyed. Look if you go back to Parshat Ekev,
Then there's human sacrifice.
we said that they were not.
But around the world, there are so many, like all this, Americans, Native Americans, they were so close. They did, human sacrifices. So why Jewish people didn't go to?
That was the land that God gave us.
I'm saying that if the purpose was to,
No, but it's because it's like the same way you bury. It says in this Parshat, if you hang someone after stoning, you have to bury them straight away. So the land isn't defiled as well. So it's about the land as well, because God gave us the promise.
The very question, and it's a very good plug for not next year like us, but in 2 July like us now. After in February, there's going to be a course called I don't remember the name of the course. It's about Israel, and the main point of the course is why the Jewish people need a land in the first place. What are the nation of spiritual, religious? What is that connected to a land? Which religion has a land? Which people? What is this whole thing? Why is Israel? I'm not talking about the politics of which part of the land, and that there's been many courses, and there will be many courses. This is a very special course that speaks about what is that? What is the idea of the land of Israel? Where did that come into our religion? How is that such a central part? Why do we even have a land? Why do we need a land? Why can't we be beautifully be Jews here in Melbourne, in Russia, in South Africa, in wherever we came from? What do we need a land? What's that to do with religion? What does it do with Judaism? And I think part of what your questions will be answered in that.
no, it's a human nature to have your place. It's like everyone needs a house. A place to live. This is my
You know why we need a house? Because God needs a house. Because God wants the one place in this world that implanted into human nature the feeling that it says. The Talmud says, anyone who doesn't have a house is not a person. Means you're not a full. If you don't have somewhere you could that you call your house, you're not a full person. The Talmud says one other thing about shoes. If you don't have shoes, you're not a person. No, because shoes is an absolute human ancestor. It's interesting, Talmud. Shoes are absolute human necessity.
The importance of place. I once heard some kind of comparison between Mount Sinai and where we receive the commandments, but we don't.
There's no holiness left there. We don't mark it.
But we do Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like also kind of how it has a different perspective because it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Asking at the end of the day, why couldn't God empty out the land before we come there? So interestingly, we said it was 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we said that God's not going to chase out the people of the land very fast, because then the animals of the wild animals will take over. Meaning, there's a certain God can't empty out the land and let the Jewish people in. There's a certain thing we have to work on. We have to take over. We have to piece by piece, step by step.
They have to be holy, pure, after refining the Am Israel in a desert. They need to go to Israel and slaughter these innocent people.
They're not. That's the point. They're not innocent people.
I mean, okay, they did something that did not agree with Jewish tradition, yes, with Jewish religion, but we can't.
It's not only that, because there's no Jewish tradition, not Jewish tradition. There's what God wants in this world, and God. The reason why we have the whole beginning of the Torah telling us how God created the world is to teach us this idea that God created the world. He chose who to give the land to. He originally gave it to them, and then he decided time's up for them. He's going to give it to us now. Take it away from them and give it to us. Meaning, it's not like this didn't agree with all the details of the code of Jewish law. No, they're not fulfilling that. Then forgot to get rid of them. No, they were idol worshippers, murderers, wicked people, whoever it is. And God said, okay, time's up. The land can't handle you anymore, and taking that land away from you and giving it to the Jewish people.
Sodom and Gomorrah. Why?
No.
Why didn't he do it himself? You know,
No.
doing it?
It's not holy or not to confront evil. The holiest Jewish people, some of the holiest Jewish people around today are the Israeli soldiers fighting Hamas or fighting Hezbollah. Holy. I'm not talking about, but the whole. It's not holy not to confront evil. It's not. It doesn't make you a nice person because you're a very nice person and only want to wear silk gloves. Meaning, true holiness is when you do go out and combat. You do good things and you elevate yourself and you're involved in studying and learning and being all spiritual and mystical and being nice to people and also confronting evil. And if you only do one without confronting evil, then you've built yourself a nice cocoon. You've built yourself a nice safe place for right now. Well, A, you haven't elevated the rest of the world, and B, the evil is also not stopping. They're also going to come. They're going to come to you. If you don't go to transform them, they'll come to you. And that's a little bit what we spoke about today. That when you come with the perspective of being above your enemies, and not that you're slugging it out with them and you're on their level, you're really above them. So then you have to win, but you have to passion for them. You're not here to rub it in their face and to show like, oh, I'm aggressive and I'm a military guy. No, because I'm really not a military guy. I have to struggle against evil. I have to win. I have to fight a war against them. I don't have a choice, and I have to win. But after that, whoever's rehabilitatable, anyone I can make them into good people that function in members of society, I will. And I'll re-educate them and I'll teach them. People say, don't fight Hamas, yeah? These people in the time of thing are no worse than Hamas. No better than Hamas. No, there's no choice. There's no choice in the matter. Sure.
I'm very sorry about that.
Good question.
Yes, to me about
Oh, these are good questions.
thinking out loud, go to the army in Israel to fight the
Good question.
Talk to that.
Whether we spoke about it, was it on Shabbos or we spoke about it here on this in
A
show?
few Parshas.
Oh, we spoke about it, Matat Maseh. We spoke about it 4 or 5 weeks ago. Good question. As I've said in the past, the Rebbe's perspective is that someone who's studying in yeshiva, that's a different role to play. While they're actually studying, there's a different role to play, which is studying, and it's also a very important role. Someone who's not in yeshiva should serve in the army, yeah? And that's why you'll see in Israel, many Chabad will serve not when they're 18, post marriage, they'll put a year and a half or 2 years in, and then they'll be in the army. You want to know what's going on right now in the thing? It's if you ask me, politics, and therefore politics is by definition something. Politics equals lies and falsehood. So this one will use politics for his needs. That one uses politics for their needs. That one will. It's a game of who can get more seats or votes and by bashing who and by screaming loud who. I don't know. I don't speak to them, and I don't agree with either side, so to speak, in the same way. But yeah.
So it's not kind of like forbidden by the Torah laws.
Their rabbis say it is. I'm not on the level that I have different views and different perspectives than them. But I understand. I understand. I do understand. Don't get me wrong. I do understand what many of them are afraid of exposure. Just like I would say, put on another foot. Someone who was quote unquote irreligious wouldn't want to put their kid in yeshiva for 3 years, right? The kid will come out different. So I can understand then why they don't want to put their kids. Don't get me wrong. I understand that perspective. I understand this. Okay, it's easy for me to talk. Let me hear, but I understand both perspectives. I understand it's a very nuanced question. A nuanced question needs a nuanced answer. It doesn't need a political debate. Political debate, by definition, becomes I can show you up. I can tell you. I could prove you wrong. I could, and it's a discussion in and of itself. But when it comes to a question of is there evil and do we have to fight against evil, it also means militarily fight against evil and also evil within our culture, within our society, within ourselves. It's not very useful to the previous service to give an example. When it's very cold in the room, I probably said this 100 times here. When it's very cold in the room, there's 2 ways to deal with that cold. Either you could put on a fur coat, it's like, it keeps you warm, or you could light a fire. If you put on a fur coat, very nice. You get your cell phone, whatever, the room is still cold, and people around you are still cold. If you light a fire, then if you chop wood and put it whatever it is, like turn on the heating. Nowadays you say the heating, not lighting a fire, but you light a fire, you've warmed up not only yourself, warmed up everyone around you, the atmosphere, everyone around you. If you're nice and spiritual and connected for yourself, beautiful. But A, everyone around you is not warmed up, and B, that the atmosphere itself is remain cold. We have a responsibility not just to ourselves, we have a responsibility to the people around us and to the world at large. Every person dealing with his pocket in his little corner of the world. You know, let's give an example, littering, yeah? If I drop one cup outside, one wrapper outside, one bag outside, that's gonna make a difference. No, but if every person says that, you end up with a very dirty landscape. Each person has an impact. It might be very small, but you have an impact in the world. Yeah. You can't stay spiritual, religious, holy in your own little.
I agree with that. The show, for example, and teaching, and I would disagree with it. And when we read about it, yeah, I understand that. I mean, like it's kind of like the title of your lesson is How to Win the War, and I understand the connection between all those 84 mitzvahs that are here. It's if you are a good person doing good things, you are merciful, and you are, and whatever you do is kind of good. So most of the chances that even in the war you will be successful, because you're in the right way, like your mindset is right, you're not evil. So, but at the same time, being all this person with all these qualities, how you can go and kill someone. So it just doesn't go together.
Well, you are right in this point that the David was told you can't build the temple. You've said the word verse says Dam Larov Shafach, you spilled much blood. And therefore, there is a price for it. There is a price for it. Therefore, his son King Solomon had to build the temple. But that doesn't mean that King David had he could have said, "Oh, I want to build a temple if I'm not going to fight the wars." He didn't have a choice in that matter. You have, when evil is knocking at the gate, you have to confront it. You can't let it in.
But like Judah Maccabee.
Yeah, he was a priest. He was a Kohen. At the end of the day, yes, it's not beautiful. It's not the way we want to do things, but.
War when the Mashiach comes and we have
It's one of the scriptures. It is the one. No law, no violence, no struggle, no jealousy, no hunger.
until then
The broken world we're living in, and we have to make it a better. We have to make it a better place. That's all.
I think we've also discussed over many months about the fact that we have to work for peace, and that I feel like going to war is part of working towards who we are. And like even in Israel now, that after the war, there's still a massive division within our community, and the fact that we still have to go out to war every day and we're fighting amongst ourselves. Should we go and fight? Should we not go and fight? It just stops that form of complacency, like nothing comes easy. Everything we have to work towards it. So it's a hard one, right?
It's just never ending.
Never ending.
Since when the land of Israel, the issue is still there, and it's.
Well, we didn't always do the right thing.
But I believe that when we all start coming together and we all start practicing, that then the Mashiach will come and then
It's a fact.
never find
It is a fact that the more united the people stand, the more firm they stand, and the less bent they are, the more people back off. It's a fact that the way to stand up a bully is to stand your ground, and not cower or cave. That is a fact. In all the negotiations over the 50, 60 years we had negotiations, we would say this is our position and we're not bending, then we would get much further. Then maybe we'll come closer to you. No, I'm saying the subject for in and of itself. It's a very long, busy subject, but